All right. Hi, everyone. I think that you all should be hearing me now. My name is Kai Salem. I'm a policy advocate with Green Energy Consumers Alliance, and I'll be presenting today on Energy Efficiency Day, the National Day celebrating energy efficiency, about state energy efficiency programs here in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. Energy efficiency is one of my personal favorite things to do policy advocacy on, and it's one of green energy consumers' favorite things because it is the most common sense way to reduce emissions. So our webinar is called Number One for What? Getting Serious About State Energy Efficiency Programs. And as people join, we'll get started. Green Energy Consumers Alliance is a nonprofit. We were founded in 1982. We primarily work in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, although we do run some of our programs in places as far afield as Virginia. Our mission is to harness our power as energy consumers to speed the transition to a low carbon future. We were founded as an oil buying co-op. That's still part of our programs. And the goal there was to bring people together to make energy systems work better for our communities. That is still part of our mission. We're all about energy affordability and local control over energy choices. But as time goes on and as the climate crisis becomes an ever more real and present threat in our lives, our mission has shifted towards sustainability and making this transition to a low carbon future. We do this work through programs and advocacy. I work on the advocacy side of things, on policy and public utilities commissions, state houses. And today we're going to talk about our energy efficiency programs and plans. Energy efficiency is the foundational strategy we have to meeting our climate goals. And I'll talk plenty about why that is today. A few logistics. First, everyone is muted to avoid background noise. In fact, I think on GoToWebinar, you are muted by default. But you can send questions for the question and answer period at the end via the question box. My contact information will be available at the end of the slideshow, so you can make sure you can follow up with any questions you might have. And finally, this webinar is being recorded, so if you aren't able to make all of it, or if you want to send it around to people, you can find it on our website later. So first, energy efficiency. What is the big deal? As I mentioned, energy efficiency is the easiest, cheapest way to reduce emissions from electric and gas systems. That is done because we're just using less energy. These efficiency programs that we have in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, we've had them for the last couple of decades in both states. They have created over billions of dollars in benefits for both states. Benefits include jobs created, the literal pocketbook savings of not spending as much on utility bills, the environmental benefits of less emissions, even public health benefits associated with having less energy used in homes. They're some of our biggest state clean energy programs. The budgets for these programs in Rhode Island, which is a very small state, are well over $100 million every year. In Massachusetts, it's many times that size. So these are, although they're kind of under the radar when we compare to the programs for solar and wind, these energy efficiency programs are big and they're doing a lot of work every day for you and I and everyone who lives in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. So the title of this webinar is Number One for What? And that's because Massachusetts and Rhode Island, year after year, are ranked among the best in the country in terms of energy efficiency. Massachusetts this past year was number one. In prior years, it was tied for number one with California, which, as we all know, is leading the country again and again on all sorts of clean energy metrics. Rhode Island, and this is unusual because Rhode Island doesn't usually lead the country on anything, ranks third in the 2019 Energy Efficiency Report, the scorecard from the Energy Efficiency Association, and it has ranked number 3 for many years running. Rhode Island is extremely proud of this. Even the governor mentions it again because we're not often highly ranked on these lists. However, today we're going to talk about why being number one isn't enough. And we need these energy efficiency programs to be doing the work year after year to set us on a path to a clean energy transition. Although we're doing better than some other states in the nation on having strong energy efficiency programs, there's a lot more we need to do if we're to get to our climate goals. And these energy efficiency programs, although they're already working hard, have the capacity to do so much more for us. That's why Green Energy Consumers advocates in both states, in the energy efficiency planning processes, in the General Assembly, to make that happen. So I'll talk a little bit about how these programs work from a policy level, and then I'll get into what's going on with the programs now, and also how you can act on the energy efficiency programs, both to take advantage for yourself and on a policy level. So energy efficiency is enabled by legislation in both states. Some of my favorite legislation around, I think it's brilliant. It's called least cost procurement in Rhode Island. In Massachusetts, it's enabled in the Green Communities Act. So the language is like this, that the Public Utilities Commission, or the Department of Public Utilities, those are the kind of the energy regulatory bodies in each state, will approve plans that contain all energy efficiency measures that are cost effective and lower cost than acquisition of additional supply. That is brilliant, because a utility company left to its own devices is just going to keep buying electricity that's produced in a power plant somewhere, probably a fossil fuel power plant like natural gas here in New England, and it's going to be delivering those natural gas fueled electrons to your house. But this legislation says that instead of going the easy route, the route that is tried and true for utility companies, the utility company instead has to build new ways to meet the electricity demand of its customers. Instead, the utility companies have to be investing in things like super efficient light bulbs or more insulation in homes. And that meets customers' electricity demands or natural gas demands. It meets customers' energy demands in a way that is less expensive than just continuing to buy those fossil fuel powered electrons. And the good news is that efficiency creates a lot of savings for people who take advantage of the programs. For example, if you get a home energy audit and an energy auditor comes into your home, replaces your light bulbs with more efficient light bulbs, you'll automatically get bill savings from that at no cost. However, even if you're not taking advantage of the programs, you're still getting savings. And that's because energy efficiency is really good for reducing electricity supply, that is how much electrons you're buying from the utility company, but it also reduces the cost of the energy infrastructure overall. This slide kind of shows a little bit how our electricity delivery system works. It's very similar to gas. Gas also has transmission and distribution pipelines that are expensive. So a power plant generates electricity, and that electricity has to travel along a whole bunch of infrastructure that we're all paying for before it gets to your house. If we all collectively use less electricity, then we need less infrastructure, less poles and wires and fewer substations and things like that, fewer pipelines for gas to get that energy to all of our houses. We can really see this when we look at the energy dollar. So when you look at your energy bill, you'll see that a lot of the charges are for electricity supply. That's that 45% from generation on this image. However, we also spend a lot of money on distribution and transmission. That is the pipelines that carry gas or the wires and substations that get the electricity to your house. So when energy efficiency programs reduce energy needs overall, they reduce, if you take advantage of the programs, the supply, that is how much electrons you're demanding from the company. They also reduce distribution costs and transmission costs because the utility company has to spend less on the electricity and gas infrastructure to get energy to your house. And this is not even to mention how important it is that these programs are creating local jobs and they're transforming markets towards efficient products, getting the worst performing products out of the market completely. And what is most important here at Green Energy Consumers is that they're reducing emissions and helping meet our climate goals. Energy efficiency, since the beginning of the millennium, since I guess 2000, has been responsible for overall decreased electricity demand in both Massachusetts and Rhode Island, even though our economies have grown and in Massachusetts and our populations have grown as well. It's responsible for the fact that both states are on track to meeting their 2020 climate goals. One other thing to mention on this slide is that we do pay for these energy efficiency programs, and that's through that 5% customer charge that's on the way right hand of the energy bill. That 5% customer charge more than pays for itself through the decrease in all of these other charges that the energy conservation charge, sorry, not the customer charge, the energy conservation charge, which is 11%, that pays for itself by decreasing all of the other components of the energy dollar. As I just mentioned, energy efficiency works really well. This graph shows that in Rhode Island, our electricity has gone down since 2005 when the first energy efficiency statute was passed. And the lighter blue bar above the total electricity purchased shows how much electricity demand we would have if not for our energy efficiency programs. That's a 20% decrease. That's pretty powerful. In Massachusetts, we'd see something similar, but I unfortunately did not find a good, easy to read graph for Massachusetts. So what exactly is in these energy efficiency programs that is leading to all of these savings? There are 6 major program areas. One is residential. That is what many of us might think of when we think about energy efficiency. That's the home energy audits. It pays for the home energy reports, which is when you look at your bill and you see that you're using more or less energy than your neighbor. It pays for retrofits of your home for new installation. It pays for lighting in your buildings. It also has a special category for income eligible, that is low income or moderate income customers, where it's paid for, a greater portion of their energy efficiency is paid for. And it has a bunch of other programs. Residential is one of the biggest drivers of those savings over the past many years. There's a program for small business. Small businesses are often more like residential consumers in the products that they need and how much they pay. And it's very different from large C&I. That stands for large commercial and industrial. That might include a college campus or a factory or a really big hotel. There's also a program for new construction. In new construction, we think about making sure that building codes are high so that all new construction, all new buildings in the state are constructed in an energy efficient way. We think about giving incentives for builders to be buying the most efficient products to put into their homes. There's also certification programs that are incentivized through the new construction program, where builders can apply to have their home certified as zero energy or super energy efficient. Connected Solutions, that's a program we have here in Rhode Island, and also National Grid runs up in Massachusetts, that is all about using smart thermostats or other smart appliances to reduce energy usage when it matters most. That is in the summer when it's really, really hot and energy demand is really high because air conditioning is running throughout the state. Connected Solutions is recognizing that energy efficiency is most important at certain times of the year, that when demand is really high, it's even more important to be conserving energy. There's also pilots and demonstrations. Although all of these other program areas do have to be demonstrated cost effective to be approved by the Public Utilities Commission, pilots and demonstrations is an area where the energy efficiency programs can explore, do some innovation, and think about what the future of the energy efficiency programs is. Even though these programs might be small now, a lot of what we have in our energy efficiency programs now that are doing a really, really good job getting savings for ratepayers, at one point they were pilots and demonstrations. A good example is Connected Solutions. Just a few years ago, that was considered a pilot project. So one thing I wanted to highlight is especially the home energy audit. That's a great way for residential customers like me to kind of have a firsthand experience of what these energy efficiency programs are doing. I'm a renter, but even as a renter, I could still take advantage of this program and have an energy audit. And as an energy nerd, I absolutely loved it, going through my home and getting a better understanding of what appliances are using how much electricity and how good my walls are at insulating. The answer was not very good. But now I can work with my landlord to get more insulation through the programs. So if you haven't had an energy audit, here's some of the things that an energy specialist will do. I did have to cut out the 5th step from this nice little graphic, which was present you with a review of the things that you can do that are most energy efficient for your home and what the price level might be. So as I've mentioned, these programs are fundamental to our clean energy future here in New England. We need to be investing heavily in these programs if we are to get to all of our climate goals. In Massachusetts, it's looking likely that the climate bill that will pass this fall is going to set the climate goals at 100% greenhouse gas emissions reductions by 2050. In Rhode Island, our goal is currently at 80% greenhouse gas emissions reductions by 2050, but as an advocate, we're working to get to 100% as well. And to do that, we need a lot of energy efficiency. It's a lot easier to get to those goals. We have to build a lot less solar and wind and other renewables if we're using less energy overall. This is especially important during those few days per year where we're using almost double as much energy as other days. And it's going to be even more important as we electrify our transportation and heating systems, which are going to put an increasing burden on the electric grid. The Rhode Island Heating Sector Transformation Report, which came out this past April, which looks at how our heating systems can get to a clean energy future, assumed that efficiency will lead to 15% less energy usage in buildings. Even making that assumption, which is not a guaranteed result, we'd have to be, there's a huge increase in electricity demand from heating. So we need to get to 15% reductions or more. The Massachusetts 80 by 50 report, which did a similar analysis on the whole energy system in Massachusetts and was just focused on 80% emissions reductions by 2050, recommended retrofitting 60% of buildings, that is 2% of buildings per year from now until 2050, which would save an amount of energy usage that is nearly equivalent to 100% of current electricity usage. So all of these planning processes are saying that we need a ton of energy efficiency. And we should be doing that work now because energy efficiency is tried and true. And some of the other technology that we'll need to get to our clean energy future, we just don't have yet. So how are these program plans made? How do we get to these programs that result in all of these savings? We are a stakeholder that's involved in the process. So to walk through it briefly, the legislative enabling statute says that the utility companies have to draft plans for how they're going to meet the law that they must invest in all cost-effective energy efficiency. Those draft plans go to stakeholders and consultants to review and comment. Here in Rhode Island, this is kind of an official process called the Technical Working Group that Green Energy Consumers sits on. In Massachusetts, stakeholders' feedback is a little bit more informal. After the draft is completed, the first draft, it goes to efficiency councils that are legislatively enabled and nominated by the government. In Rhode Island, we call that the Energy Efficiency and Resource Management Council. In Massachusetts, it's the Energy Efficiency Advisory Council. And those councils have people on them who are representing constituency groups like residential consumers and environmental interests or large business, all sorts of different things. The councils review, vote on the plan. If they vote to approve the plan, it gets filed with the Public Utilities Commission in Rhode Island or the Department of Public Utilities in Massachusetts. And then those regulatory bodies approve the plan Sometimes the regulatory bodies add additional changes, and they're really reviewing for consistency with state law. Right now, we're engaged in the program plan development process in both states, especially in Rhode Island, which is really right in the middle of developing the next 3-year efficiency plan and the next annual plan. A really, really important trend in energy efficiency programs is that over the past decade or so, the conversion of all of our lighting in both states from incandescent bulbs to super efficient LED bulbs has driven a huge quantity of the energy savings in both states. That 20% drop in overall electricity usage that we saw in Rhode Island, a lot of that is because LEDs are super efficient and now super cheap. So we were able to convert our lighting stock through these energy programs over to LEDs. Unfortunately, the market has been transformed. You can't really just go out and buy incandescent bulbs in the same way. So what are these energy efficiency programs going to do to keep up that level of successful energy savings? In Rhode Island, we're asking that question all the time as energy efficiency stakeholders, especially right now. So in Rhode Island, our energy efficiency programs are governed by a 3-year plan, which sets kind of high-level targets for what the energy efficiency programs will achieve every year, and then a more detailed annual plan that goes into the exact budgets and programs that will be conducted by the energy efficiency plan. This year, we're working on both of those. In addition, this year, we received our first potential study in about a decade. So potential studies highlight the savings potential in the state for different areas of energy savings. This year's potential study identified efficient heating and cooling technologies, weatherization, and a few other areas as the areas of the state with the most potential. There is no longer a lot of potential in LEDs, as I just described. Using this study, National Grid is working to develop the 3-year plan and the annual plan, and then that goes to the stakeholders like green energy consumers. And currently, the plan is before the Energy Efficiency and Resource Management Council, which will take a vote on whether or not to approve this plan tomorrow afternoon. Meanwhile, we're dealing with all of the changes that the COVID-19 pandemic has brought to all aspects of the economy, including the energy programs. And so far, the current draft plans, at least from green energy consumers, don't do enough to move the programs forward. We're seeing a smaller number of projected energy savings than in past years. Rather than doubling down on efficiency, which we need in the face of the climate crisis, the utility company and it seems like the state agencies are pulling back on energy efficiency. So, for example, back in the spring, the Public Utilities Commission approved a draft target for electric savings based on what was achievable in the potential study. And what has been proposed is significantly lower than that. So the electric savings target, the goal for how much electricity energy efficiency savings will be achieved, is about half that which was approved by the Public Utilities Commission. We can be doing way better. Very similar on the gas side, and this graph is a little bit easier to read, but the max bar, so those high red bars, show for 2021, 2022, and 2023, the level of savings that the potential study agreed was achievable and the Public Utilities Commission recommended that National Grid try to achieve. What has been proposed is about half that, and that's what that blue bar is over 2021, 2022, and 2023. So we are leaving cost-effective savings on the table. If we increase the budget for these programs, we could potentially get so much more cost-effective energy efficiency savings, and it would pay itself back through the savings on our bills, through the environmental benefits, through job creation. Similarly, we've seen the programs failing low-income customers in Rhode Island. In this chart, you can see that the program participants on the income eligible, that is low income customers, has dipped since 2016, and we haven't seen enough. I will say that in more recent drafts of the annual plan and current 3-year plan of Rhode Island, we have seen National Grid outline better ways to serve low-income customers. So although we have seen the programs failing them recently, Green Energy Consumers is optimistic that the latest plans are doing more to serve low-income customers. In Massachusetts, the energy efficiency programs are governed by 3-year plans primarily. They don't have the same annual plan format. So right now we're in the midst of a 3-year plan that lasts from 2019 to 2021. The energy efficiency programs, despite the pandemic, are largely on track to meet the goals. And this fall, we're seeing the beginning of the next planning cycle for the 2022 through 2024 plan. However, the last 3-year plan approved lower savings targets than we've seen in prior plans. So we want to see those lifetime savings continue to go up, and we must do better to serve low and moderate income customers, as well as to use these energy efficiency programs to invest in electrification of our heating systems, which is the future when it comes to climate-friendly heating. In this graph, you can really see that lifetime electric savings and lifetime gas savings that are being achieved in the residential sector is on a downward trend. When we need these energy efficiency programs to be working hard to get us to our climate goals, that is the wrong direction. So why are we seeing these downward trends even though the budgets are largely staying the same? Part of that is because we're not doing the upfront investment. The programs are not willing to do the upfront investment that we need to achieve high efficiency targets. The low-hanging fruit, that is the really cheap sources of energy savings, are largely gone. LEDs, for example, that is a really cheap way to get a huge amount of energy savings. However, there's still a ton of cost-effective savings left. And even though it costs more, and especially costs more upfront to get energy savings from these kind of more deeper retrofit measures, it's still worth doing. For example, installing insulation in your home might cost more than replacing your light bulbs with LEDs, but it will pay itself back through your utility bills, through the other benefits that we see. So we can't be afraid of upfront investment because we get the savings and it is cost effective and also necessary to get to those climate goals. Second, there's a lot of entrenched patterns. The utility programs have been running these energy efficiency programs largely the same way for a while now. Furthermore, we keep getting these #1 in the country rankings, and I think state agency officials especially kind of tend to rest on their laurels and say, we're doing the best in the country, we're doing as much as we need to be. However, there's still a lot we need to be doing. We are not achieving all cost-effective savings in either state, and we need to be investing more in energy efficiency. Finally, the COVID-19 pandemic is certainly a factor as we develop the next round of efficiency programs. It's been harder to achieve the energy savings that we expected this year because you couldn't have technicians coming into homes, things like that. There's just a lot of uncertainty around. So a couple of ways that you can take action and be involved in these energy efficiency programs. First, if you've never gone a home energy audit, I really, really recommend it. The programs have recently launched virtual home energy audits. So with reason, you might not be comfortable having someone come into your home, but you can start from your computer right now, right after this webinar, a virtual home energy audit and get an understanding of what kinds of upgrades your home could get. You can even do this as a renter. In addition, home energy audits are back up and running, the in-person ones, with full protective gear. So you can call to set that up as well. Especially as it's getting colder, it's a great time to be taking advantage of the really, really good incentives for weatherization and insulation. This is what the virtual home energy assessment looks like, the first page. So it's pretty easy to fill out. It's a 5-minute survey. and it can really set you on the path to making sure you're taking advantage of these programs, which at the end of the day exist for you, the customer, to use. Second, you can make a difference by commenting on the efficiency programs and helping develop these policy programs. In Rhode Island, as I mentioned, the Energy Efficiency and Resource Management Council is voting to approve the final 3-year energy efficiency plan and annual energy efficiency plan for 2021. The next meeting is this Thursday at 3:30 p.m. You can sign up to give public comment at that meeting, or you can submit public comment online at rieermc.ri.gov. Public comment can look like anything from I really care about energy efficiency and want to see these programs really strong, or can go into more detail onto your personal interests and what you want to see from these programs, and feel free to reach out if you want ideas on what to say. In Massachusetts, as I mentioned, although there won't be a final plan draft until next year, the planning process for the next 3-year energy efficiency plan is starting this fall. So there's going to be a series of listening sessions. The first one, I believe, is tonight, and public workshops on different aspects of the plans. So that's a great way to get involved and give input during the listening sessions, or weigh in and learn more from the public workshops. And of course, you can support our work here at Green Energy Consumers to make sure that the energy efficiency programs are working better and that we're speeding the transition to a low carbon future by donating to our programs. Our donations go to support our policy advocacy program. That is some of what I described today with energy efficiency. We also work on renewable energy policy. We work on setting stronger climate targets. We work on environmental justice legislation. So it's a whole suite of different things that we do related to speeding the transition to a low carbon future. Donations also support our Drive Green EV program, which helps people get into electric cars on the roads, reducing our reliance on gasoline. And it helps us expand our green municipal aggregation program, where we help towns and communities switch to greener, cheaper electricity. So finally, it looks like there's plenty of time for questions. And also, before we get to questions, I want to make sure I mention that we have lots of webinars coming up. You can register for our webinars at greenenergyconsumers.org/events. And our next webinar, I believe, is at 12 p.m. on October 13th. And that is about green municipal aggregation, which I described, getting green electricity to your community. And now, feel free to ask questions. I will be checking in on the chat, I believe, for the questions. All right, we have a question around the 2050 goals. So the 2050 goals were made 100% by 2050. So for that new goal, how has Green Energy Consumers adapted to meeting the higher bar? So in Massachusetts, we are expecting the climate bill that is currently in conference committee, but should pass this fall, to make the 2050 goals 100% by 2050. And for that new goal, I wouldn't say that Green Energy Consumers is changing our policy to meet that higher bar, because our policy priority has always been to get to that 100% by 2050 goal as soon as possible. And we believe that we need to be investing in all cost-effective energy efficiency now. And that is the pathway, the best pathway to get to 80% carbon emissions by 2050 or 100% carbon emissions. In Rhode Island, the fact that Massachusetts has adopted a 100% by 2050 goal will make it easier for us to pass a similar policy in Rhode Island. So I think that it does change our advocacy a little bit in Rhode Island, and that we're going to be pushing even harder on getting a 100% by 2050 goal here in Rhode Island. The next question is around new construction and incentives for new construction. Question asker is building a new house and wondering if they can reach out to the program for purchase assistance. Great question. Also very exciting that you're building a new house and want to invest in energy efficiency. I definitely recommend reaching out to the program for assistance, and there are really knowledgeable people who work on these programs who can connect you with incentives for super energy efficient products, as well as certification programs, things like that. So I would say follow up with me afterwards, and I can connect you to an individual in the utility programs who can help you, because as kind of an individual rather than a business, it can be hard to get directly connected with utility program reps. If you do have a business, then you can go on to the MassSave website section for new construction, and there will be contact information there. Similarly, in Rhode Island, the National Grid Energy Efficiency Program website for new construction should have information. We have a question, if by 2035 all cars and trucks are electric, how much will this increase generation demand? If by 2035 all cars and trucks were electric, this would increase generation demand a whole lot. I am just going to give my best estimate that it might be doubling generation demand. However, I think even if we had the best policies in place, it would be unlikely that all of our cars and trucks would be electric by 2035. Although it was really, really great to see in California the policy from the governor that all new sales would be electric by 2035. So it would be great to see that. And of course, it will take a little while after all new sales are electric for the current stock to turn over completely. But we want to get there as soon as possible. And we can mitigate the new demand on the electricity system by making sure that we have as much energy efficiency as possible, of course, and also making sure that the demand on the electric system is spread out throughout the day, so that not all of the cars and trucks are charging all at once, for example. We have a question about the program administrators have a huge conflict of interest. How do we get the efficiency programs out of the hands of the utilities and have those whose only interest is in energy savings administer these programs? I think that's a really interesting question. In some other states, for example, Vermont, we see that there is a whole energy efficiency utility. So energy efficiency is not in the hands of the utility companies who also buy and sell electricity, but it is a whole other entity that does this work. I will say that there is a lot of work on aligning the incentives of the public utilities so that they're to minimize the conflict of interest. This is done in a few different ways. One is that the utility companies do not make any money off of selling more electricity or more gas. It's called decoupling. It's a policy that's been in place for a while in both states. So it's not like the utility companies are being incentivized to both invest in energy efficiency and also make a profit out of selling more electricity or gas. That said, they do make a profit out of doing improvements to the gas and electric infrastructure. They also make a profit off of meeting their energy goals. So I think that really does drive why the utility programs are incentivized to invest in energy efficiency. There is a movement towards something called performance-based incentives or performance-based rate making in both states, which would further align the utility companies' incentives with what we as customers want to see. We have a question about heat pumps and the fact that they are very expensive. Specifically, should low-income people have heat pumps when they're very expensive? I think that's what the question is asking. Heat pumps are very expensive, and they can be. In some cases, it is less expensive to have an electric heat pump than alternative heating. For example, it is a lot less expensive to run an electric heat pump than to run electric resistance heating systems. For some oil and delivered fuel heating homes, it can be less expensive to operate electric heat pumps because they are super efficient and they provide cooling as well. And further, so the programs, and we certainly advocate that the programs are never converting a house to a heating system that is going to cost more for the people who live there. We do want energy to be affordable overall. So for now, the programs are really focusing in on converting electric resistance and oil heated homes to heat pumps. And the incentives are structured such that low-income folks are not going to be paying a huge amount upfront for those heat pumps. That said, we are hoping that the heat pump technology improves over time so that it really can be a truly low-cost option. And for now, that we install heat pumps only where it's most cost-effective. I like this question a lot. How do we require landlords to make their buildings more energy efficient? That is a really hard challenge. Like I said, I'm a renter, so I certainly know the experience of living in a really not energy efficient home and having to work with my landlord on it. One recent development that has occurred partly due to green energy consumers' consistent year after year advocacy on behalf of renters and energy efficiency in rented homes is that there has been a 100% incentive for rental units. That means that weatherization has been covered in rental units up to $2,000 per unit for landlords. That's a good deal for the landlords. They make their renters happy. They are increasing the value of their property. Unfortunately, not all of those benefits go to the renters, but it does decrease the renters' utility bills. As far as requiring landlords to invest in energy efficiency, I think the best strategy for that would be increasing building performance standards and building energy codes, which would make sure that all new buildings are meeting a certain minimum level of energy efficiency. And the building performance standards would require that buildings over time are gradually become more and more energy efficient. So that is especially a legislative strategy that we will be taking in the coming years to make sure that buildings are more energy efficient. One question, if I've had an energy audit many years ago, is it possible to get another? Yes, absolutely. The programs have changed a lot. Your home probably has changed a lot since then, so you can definitely get another. We have a question about what specifically we would suggest be included in the Massachusetts 2022 to 2024 plan. I would say that we don't have our priority list fully complete yet. Like I said, it's really just the very beginning stages. But some of our priorities will be that the plan has a really strong approach to delivering energy efficiency equitably, that it's doing its best to serve not just low-income customers, but all groups who have been historically excluded from energy efficiency programs, whether that is due to lack of language fluency, lack of access because of language, because of marginalized races, or because they're renters. So we definitely want to make sure that we see a strong approach to equity and justice in the 2022 to 2024 plan. We want to see an increase in energy savings targets overall. We believe that energy savings should be going up every year, not down. And we'd like to see a stronger electrification plan. Although electrification was included in this current 3-year plan, so far Massachusetts is not on track or even close to meeting its electrification targets. So in the next 3-year plan, we want to see some of the problems in that program identified and rectified. But also there's so many other new things that will be coming up in the plan, including seeing more weatherization and insulation. We want to see more creative demand management solutions. And over the course of this fall, we hope to see those things start to come together. In Massachusetts, there's a rebate offered for homes with oil systems being converted to heat pumps. Are you or is anyone working on getting this benefit for gas customers to get a rebate as well? That is a good question. So that is true in both Massachusetts and formerly in Rhode Island. Unfortunately, I am very frustrated about this. The Public Utilities Commission decided this past December to take away the rebate in Rhode Island, but hopefully that'll be up and running again soon. So we are not actively advocating for getting this benefit for gas customers to get a rebate as well. I would say that we do support for gas customers who want to go above and beyond and install a electric heat pump system. That is awesome, and they should be supported in doing so by the programs. However, as I mentioned earlier, for most customers who currently heat with gas, their electric bills will end up going up, their overall energy bills will go up, and it will be a more expensive solution. So as heat pumps roll out, we don't want to be in a situation where we are on a large scale supporting people getting more expensive energy. In the short term, like the next few years, we want to be focusing on converting oil homes and electric resistance homes to electric heat pumps. And then as the technology develops, maybe there's a carbon price that is making gas costs go up, then it will become more cost effective for electric heat pumps to go in gas homes. From Joel Gates, are there any programs that individuals can support or invest in, especially for marginalized communities? That's a really awesome question. One program that I'll shout out quickly is our oil bank program, where you can donate to cover heating costs for people who couldn't otherwise afford it. But I don't think that exactly gets at the question, especially when it comes to green energy. I would say that donating to a whole variety of different organizations, including green energy consumers, or also groups that work more closely on environmental justice, can do more to support clean energy options for marginalized communities. But for the most part, the energy efficiency programs themselves are well funded, and there would be less of a reason for individuals to invest in the energy efficiency programs. However, doing a little bit of policy advocacy and telling the designers of these programs that you think it's important that they prioritize equity, that can go a long way to making these programs invest more money in marginalized communities. We have a question on what are some of the new frontier of energy efficiency programs and investments that you think should come next? Great question. There's a whole bunch of different things. I think top of the list in terms of new frontiers is what we call active demand management. So that's the idea that there are certain hours per year, usually the hottest or coldest hours of the year, when it is most important to conserve energy because everyone is using energy all at once. There are programs that are getting off the ground to support energy storage that can do a lot to reduce energy usage during those key hours, or where the utility will remotely control a smart thermostat during those hours. I think those are really exciting programs. Similarly, if we're looking at the large commercial and industrial side, there are programs that are looking at automated lighting and kind of network controls that will take a network approach, a very computerized approach to reducing energy in unused areas of a building or a manufacturing site. So those are some of the places where there is a lot of action now. But that said, there's also still a lot of places, there's a lot of room for investment in like tried and true bread and butter insulation, things that have been done for years, but we always need more insulation. And what program suggestions do you have in Rhode Island to achieve deeper savings? I think in Rhode Island, the main thing that I'd like to see now, although the energy efficiency program plans are getting close to complete, is just more investment. We are artificially limiting how much we're investing in these programs. If we invested more in these programs, we would get even more out of them. And yet, largely because of the pandemic, there's a lot of concern that people would perceive this as energy bills going up, even though for every dollar we invest in energy efficiency programs, it reduces the energy dollar overall. So one thing we saw is National Grid and state agencies agreeing that it would be okay to limit the amount that customers are charged for energy efficiency programs at the amount that was charged last year. But we could achieve a lot deeper savings, and we could invest in a whole bunch of measures that would lead to much more savings overall if we didn't have that kind of artificial cap and instead allowed a greater investment in energy efficiency. Where can I get more information on the first Massachusetts public session on its 3-year plan? Great question. I will, in the follow-up email, I'll include the link, and I should have on the slides earlier, but on the Energy Efficiency Advisory Council website, there's a list of the public workshops and listening sessions, so you can find the Zoom links there as well as the agendas. So many great questions. I don't think I'll be able to answer them all, but I think we went through the bulk. I'm just looking through to see if there's any last ones. I like this question. If we can't get the efficiency programs out of the utilities' hands, how do we force them to provide detailed data, census tract level at least, not just zip code? That's a good question. So in Rhode Island, utility company is actually not required to provide a whole lot of data to state agencies. In Massachusetts, we do receive a little bit more data from the utilities, but I think the strategy to getting the utility companies to provide more data is largely through the Public Utilities Commissions and the energy efficiency councils. So as a advocate or stakeholder, the best way would be to make comments about that to the energy efficiency councils in both states. In Rhode Island, I know that this is a larger issue where National Grid is not required and thus doesn't to provide certain types of energy data to state agencies and the public. And there is an ongoing amount of effort from the Office of Energy Resources to understand better with National Grid where, for example, solar installations are, things like that. We have a question on where can we get information on rebates for oil conversion to heat pumps. So for Massachusetts, that'll be on the MassSave website. You can Google it, MassSave. And in Rhode Island, it will be on the list of incentives that's on Rhode Island's National Grid website. Unfortunately, the rebates for converting oil to heat pumps in Rhode Island are temporarily unavailable and are not going to be available until the state passes its budget, which is being delayed by waiting for federal corona relief. And I think that those are the main questions that I see. So thank you all so much for all these great questions. And you have my email address for following up. I see my colleague put the list of events for the Massachusetts Energy Efficiency Advisory Council in the chat. And as I said earlier, the recording will be available later. So thank you so much for attending. Check out our blog at blog.greenenergyconsumers.org, or you can register for future webinars on our events website. And have a great afternoon.